Right, and we are live. Hello, everyone out there. Welcome to the Facebook Live broadcast in support of the 2023 Healthy Dog Expo. Please drop a comment in the links or in the chat box or whatever you've got on your device to let us know you're out there and where you're watching from. And we'll just make sure we've got a couple people on and get started. I see we've got somebody there. Welcome. I know there's a slight delay with the app that we use. We've got several people on. So since we're starting a couple minutes late, we'll get started right away. Thank you so much for jumping on. Hi, Janet from Northern New York, Janet has quite a flock of chickens, and she was delivering eggs today.
Oh, that's great.
Oh, I wish she lived closer because eggs are the bomb. My dog's
I'm embarking on an egg project in the spring, so I'm excited to be, at least for my own family, in the same boat to some degree.
Yeah. So welcome, Billy. Billy, VP of Nutrition and Communication at Green JuJu Company from the beautiful Pacific Northwest. Thanks so much for joining me, and welcome to Facebook.
Well, thank you very much. I've had the pleasure of speaking at, I think it was two or three times, right?
2 or 3 times, yeah.
Two times, and then one time I did kind of like a meet and greet thing.
Yeah.
And I've just enjoyed the experience every time, and particularly I think last year you just there was just a certain energy.
There was a certain energy last year, wasn't there?
Of people being together, and the great lineup of speakers, and just there is no replacement for in-person events, and I'm so glad they're happening more across the country. And so I know I'm excited to come up and Green JuJu will have...
You're doing some appearances, right, with Dr. Morgan's little traveling roadshow?
Yeah, we're doing.
I'm thrilled she's doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I love Judy and her team. I mean, I was just down there doing some videos and stuff, and staying at the farm. I always like, they're very nice to me, because I'll be like, hey, I'm going to be close to you, so I'm going to come stay at your house, right, and hang out with you.
Like, sure.
So
come meet the menagerie.
Yeah, so it's we're doing. I'm actually having a lot more stores that are reaching out to me about those events. So they're going to be happening kind of all over the country, and the way that they're working those is Judy is speaking, and then they pick other speakers. And so I've been lucky enough that some people have wanted to pick me, and so I love doing these things, because not only you get to meet sort of like your tribe and your people, but also like there's just something about being in a room and presenting something totally different than you normally present. And seeing sort of like how that relates to people. So I'm looking forward to those.
And sharing with people in person. Zooms are great, obviously.
Yeah.
And Facebook Live, and pick your platform. But being able to talk with a person, to go sit down, have a coffee, whatever, it's special. And especially coming out of the pandemic, when we were so isolated, being amongst your tribe is exactly what we needed.
Yeah. And so I don't know. We'll see what happens. I might try to bring the family, but sometimes it can be hard to travel. Maple will be 2 in May, so it's a little bit.
What about Huck?
The funny thing about Huckleberry is that I don't know if when he was a puppy, he got motion sickness. He might be out of that phase, but also he still gets like nervous in the car. And so, and it's funny because Maple is definitely getting into where she sometimes has the toddler tantrum, the 2. So we'll see on that. But
that would be fun.
The nice thing for me is I don't live that far from you, so I can drive there regardless. And that for someone who flies a lot, that's
that's got to be a godsend. Absolutely. So how long now have you been with Green JuJu? And for people who aren't familiar with the company, can you kind of highlight what Green JuJu is about?
Yeah, so I've been with Green JuJu. Well, Green JuJu has been a company since 2014. I've been with them It'll be 2 years on June 1st. So it's been a wild 2 years. I think
Hmm.
Kelly Marion, the owner and founder, would sort of agree that we've released a lot of products, and we have some really exciting stuff coming up in terms of not only products but also some you know data gathering and that kind of stuff, because I think that's really important as well.
Yeah.
So for me, I have always been impressed with what Kelly's been doing, and so I sought her out to
Hmm.
work for her. And it's been really great experience. We've been friends for a very long time, and so um, Great JuJu is the best, makes the best whole food supplements in the market. So it started with Kelly sort of innovating the veggie blend concept. She was the
Hmm.
first person to do that in the commercial pet food
Yeah.
industry. We still do it the best. We still juice them and then add the pulp back to further break down the cell
Sure.
walls. The vegetables are always the star, and the broth and the coconut are more of a supportive
Hmm.
ingredient in that. Um, and we have two green blends, one of which ferments itself in the refrigerator. We have a golden blend, which is a great replacer for people who use pumpkin daily and things like that, as a more diverse sort of element to that. We last year we added two frozen fermented pastes,
Nice.
Bam's Beets and Lewis fermented golden paste, and so those are great. Not only the coolest thing about those are wild fermented, so you're
Hmm.
getting those soil based
Yeah.
differing microbes every time you feed
Right.
it. So it's just a cool concept that the probiotics come from. It depends on the farm the beet or the purple
Hmm.
cabbage was grown on. Depends on what animals were on that farm. All of these things, and I
Right.
think that's in a lot of ways the future of probiotics. So you can use that to inoculate the gut, and then you can use
Mhm.
the blends to sort of feed that, with the
Well,
fiber
and
profile.
this is a theme that seems to have been coming up as I've done these lives with my various sponsors. And we've been talking a lot about the importance of fiber, about vegetables, and God forbid about starches and even grains, because some companies do still utilize carbs.
Yeah.
And, they all have a place when we're tailoring the diet to the individual dog. And it sometimes makes me crazy when I see, I'll call them, for lack of a better term, the prey model feeders, that are like, if you want to put a vegetable in the bowl, they're going to troll you on Facebook, ban you from the group, cast your name into the fire. And I think it's really short sighted because they're shortchanging the microbiome.
Oh, I mean, one of the things that when I was at AHVMA last year,
Hmm.
but Animal Biome was talking about was the fact that dogs that eat raw diets don't have a diverse enough microbiome, and it's because there's such a small amount of plants in it. Not
Yeah,
to say that plants should make up the majority of the diet,
right.
but the other thing I'd like to say on that, which I think is very interesting in general with the how people are online and in that aspect of it, a little self-reflection that I've been thinking about, in the past month or so is sort of like if someone makes a post and says, "Hey, I'm doing something better for my dog. I'm adding this fresh food, or I'm doing this or this." If your reaction isn't "Good job, that's great that you're doing that." If your reaction is, "Well, let me tell you what you're doing wrong,"
Hmm.
that's the wrong reaction,
Right.
because go back to, I'm a huge advocate of obviously like balanced diets, but go back to, 200 years ago when dogs were just eating scraps and were healthier than they are now, right? There was no balance.
Hmm.
So I just think as an industry, and especially, I'm not a part of any of the online groups or anything, but
Smart.
yeah, exactly. But from that perspective, like if you are, I would just approach that with like a level of humility and say, "Hey, look, I think that's really awesome that you're doing this. Hey, you took some random veggies from your fridge and threw them into your dog's bowl, and that's the first step for you.
Hmm.
That's incredible." Not, "Hey, you should really be doing meat, and this is what," it's kind
Yeah.
of, that's how I approach those kinds of situations.
Yeah. And, if you can't click like on it as the very smallest gesture for that person who's
Yeah,
throwing some veggies in the bowl, just scroll on by. Just let it go and live in your world. But
exactly.
it's
Oh,
it's
uh,
hard.
well, and then so I just want to kind of like finish the
Yeah.
product aspect of it. So we have 2 bone broths. We actually have duck and bison, which are
Nice.
completely unique, and they're on the nice, like, thick side with you can see the collagen and that aspect of
Mhm.
it. Um,
You
we
have
have
treats too, don't you?
Yes, we actually, and that's another one. I helped with 2 of those, but Kelly developed most of those. And again, this goes
Uh-huh.
back to her being a really innovative formulator in
Yeah.
terms of she took organ meats, which we know are the most nutrient dense form of meat, and paired those with specific antioxidant color types. So every color in nature is a different antioxidant type, and so essentially, we have bison green and beef red
Mhm.
and duck orange, pork pink, and salmon blue, and all of those are going to uh, provide different. So we don't ever make things that, like, we wouldn't put like an ingredient in our treats to get like a consistency. We just use functional food, so it's just
Right.
organs and whole plants.
Yeah, we're not gonna see texturizers or
Yeah,
glycerin or something like that we might in another treat.
exactly. And then the other thing about those two, which I think is really cool, is Kelly really went above and beyond. And as far as I know, we're the only people who use non-GMO verified vitamin E as a preservative,
That
because
is
pretty much
amazing.
all the GMO is, or all the vitamin E is GMO.
Yeah.
And it came from Kelly's dog not being able to really do the treats on the first test batch, was having
Mhm.
issues. And then they switched to the non-GMO, and it was,
Yeah. It was life-changing.
yeah, exactly. And then we have 3 single ingredient treats, 2 of which we just released like a month ago. So we have bison liver. We also have wild caught salmon, and that's the actual fillet pieces from wild caught salmon
Mhm.
in the Pacific Northwest. And then we also have rabbit trainers, which are just rabbit. So for those people that need, you know,
Yeah.
one ingredient treats, sensitive
Well,
rabbit.
and even for people who are trying to have variety in their daily feeding regime, but can't source rabbit for a meal, great, rabbit for a treat. You're still getting a little bit of rabbit in your rotation.
Exactly. And that's kind of like what we advocate for. If you're using our blends, you can rotate between, if you rotate between the 3 vegetable blends, you'll get 17 different plants into your diet,
Wow,
your pet's diet. And
phenomenal.
that's easy. Like, you could just use one for a week and then one the next week. And that goes back to that diversity in the microbiome to,
Mhm,
feed those bacteria. Or even with the treats, I mean, each one has 3 or 4 different, like, low carbohydrate, high antioxidant plants. So if, let's say, you just rotate between the treats and get
mhm,
those different things in. I like to think we make products that push the nutritional envelope for
mhm.
real people,
Yeah.
because my first lesson in, because obviously, like, I obsess over nutrition all the time. That's essentially all I think about
Well, you're
most
a
of the time.
science guy.
Yeah, so, like, that's all I really think about, but I know that that's not most people. And I remember having this very distinct moment when we had Maple, and for the first month I was like, I don't have time to do anything for feeding this dog. Like, I because
Mhm,
we were both it was actually like a month before my last job, and then Green Juju started. And so, I was up for all the feedings, doing all that stuff,
mhm.
and I was like, wow, I don't have. Previous to that, I was always like, everyone has time to do X, Y, and Z, and I
I
was like,
remember you used to put pictures of the meals up for the dog.
yeah, I do that still
Still,
occasionally, but
occasionally.
it's
But
less,
for a while, it was like every day what Billy's feeding.
But yeah, I remember being like, I remember at one point, and when Lua was kind of nearing her end, I was doing some very specific things. I
Yeah.
remember at one point I was like growing sprouts and chopping them freshly every
Mhm.
time I fed her, and I was like, I just don't have time to do this.
Right.
And so I remember Green Juju really coming in handy during that time. That's actually where I figured out that Bailey's blend ferments itself, because I was using it for like, 10 days and went through that sort of process. But um, so we know most people have crazy busy lives, and they just want to
Mhm.
do something that's easy and healthy for their pet.
Right.
And that's really, since I joined Green Juju, been my focus. It's one of the reasons I wanted to work with a company that did freeze dried, because I had never done that in the past.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I've had family members that won't do anything that's refrigerated or frozen. So, it's like I want to help their dogs and cats too.
Mhm.
So, and a lot of the treats are great for cats. I'll throw that out there as well.
Yeah, we actually had a quick question from Deanne. Where would you recommend starting for cats? How do you get cats to accept vegetables?
Well, here's the thing. I would recommend probably starting. So there was a study I saw recently that talked about cats having a better body condition and longer lives when they ingested plant antioxidants. But
Hmm.
I would say when it comes to cats, the more relevant products I think are going to be the bone broth. I didn't even cover the fact that we have raw milk. That's crazy that I forgot
You
raw milk.
forgot raw milk.
How
Really?
is that how is that
Yeah.
possible? I must be, like,
You
full
have
green
you have
JuJu now.
goat's milk, right?
Yes. We, so the goat's milk would be a really wonderful place to start as well, and the something that we've been really focusing on recently, it's funny because when it comes to milk, obviously, it's something I'm obsessed with and,
Mhm.
something that I don't realize sometimes, like, oh, I think people will think this is cool. So, one of the big differences in our milk, and as far as I know, this is really the only milk like this in the industry, is our goats are actually, so they're milked at like 4 or 5 in the morning.
Mhm.
That milk is delivered within an hour or two to our facility and then bottled and
Talking about
frozen immediately.
fresh.
So it's the freshest, by far the freshest product on the market. It's all certified for human consumption in the state of
Mhm.
Pennsylvania. So you
Good.
go through the certs to be on a human grocery store shelf. Um, so quality wise, it's we wanted to not only put out something that was the best quality, but the best price point as well. So when you go to
Mhm.
your local store, it will be the best price point because we don't want to keep anyone out because it's too high in price, and we
Right.
want everybody to be able to do that. But going back to the cats, the bone broth is going to be great, especially if this. I think she mentioned she has 9 rescue
Find
cats
rescue
here, so
cats. Yeah.
if you're feeding dry food, the adding any kind of moisture is going to, obviously help the kidneys to not have issues. But
Right.
that's just, I mean, I feed my dog a bunch of bone broth, and obviously he's eating a diet that has moisture in it as
Mhm.
well. So I think that's just a good practice, just generally. So the milk, the bone broth, and then the treats are actually very, very palatable for
Oh
cats.
yeah.
So I'm always surprised, and was very surprised when I joined Green Juju as far as it wasn't just like anyone could be like, the treats are really palatable, but the amount of people who said my dog or cat won't eat treats but will eat these always kind of blows me away. So, and I think it's because of the high organ content.
That
But
very well could be.
yeah, so I think it just depends. But that's kind of where I would start, because I think those things will be just more relevant to cats. But then on the vegetable end, if you are having a cat that's having like ongoing digestive issues, feeding our blends is going to be better than, say, a fiber supplement because you are going to get more diversified fiber. They are
Yeah,
going to be able to get some of that antioxidant content. Obviously, cats are different than dogs in terms of what they can ingest from plants, but if they'll eat it, I mean, the benefit is there for sure.
definitely. And Janet asks, would you hydrate the treats for cats or feed them dry?
You could do either. It just depends on how you give a treat. Like a lot of people that use them for like dog training are obviously not rehydrating
Right.
them.
Right.
But if you're putting them over the food, rehydrating it is great. You can kind of break them up. And each one is going to be different consistency wise. So the beef and the bison are going to be on the harder side just by virtue of when you freeze dry something, the type of fat it is. So like the duck will be a lot more
Hmm.
soft, for example, just because it's a different fat profile. Um, so you can do either, but I would recommend hydrating it if you're putting it on the food because why not? That would just
That would
add
just add
more.
benefit.
Yeah.
Definitely. And we're on a roll with questions here for a minute. So, do you alternate your milks and broths or use them both?
I like using them both because they do different things. The milk is just a really great sort of baseline for covering up, potential nutritional deficiencies. And it's an interesting product because it's one of those products where, you would never look at the nutritional profile of milk and say, wow, this is a complete imbalanced food. But I've seen animals live for more than 5 years off just raw milk and water.
Right.
So I think it speaks to, it's not always the amount of the nutrient, it's the bioavailability of that nutrient. So, and also when nature makes food like milk, it puts it in a really, really high moisture environment, which helps to increase the digestibility of
Yeah.
it. So I would recommend both, but if it always comes down to what works best for the dog or the cat and what works best for, in that case. But some people do like milk in the morning and broth at night,
Yeah.
um,
So
I would, traditionally when I've fed my dog, I've just done both in every meal.
yeah, and I mean, we used to be hard line about never mixing kibble with raw. Now people do it all the time, and it seems to work fine for most dogs. So try it and see.
I think it is fine. I think what happens sometimes is that you could take a nutritional concept that could be true. Um, a great line to draw on that is like the histamine thing. It's a big
Hmm.
thing right now. There's
Right.
not a lot of, all of that is like, and this is fair in nutrition, but most of that is like conjecture. Like we can measure the amount of histamines, but we don't know how it's affecting the body because
Hmm.
we just don't know. There's a gap there. And
Right.
so I think with the kibble thing, I think you could take a concept and go, oh, kibble digests at a different speed than raw, therefore you shouldn't feed them together. But I don't know if that was ever based on like dogs doing that and having a bunch of negative reactions, if that makes sense. Versus like you can take a concept and then you can kind of, just run with what the potential could be to go wrong.
And that somebody's willing to add fresh food to a kibble bowl. I don't want to do
Exactly.
anything. I don't want to do anything to discourage them from doing that. And then, as you kind of alluded to earlier, have you tried this? Oh, and my microphone's kicking out, so I'm going to shout. So
Yeah, I was gonna say you cut out there for a second.
yeah, so what I was saying was, let's not discourage them from putting good stuff in the bowl, and as they go forward, gently encourage them with ideas about how they might do it better.
Exactly.
It's still better than feeding 100% kibble.
Yeah, I mean anything. I'm a huge advocate for people just adding their own food as long as it's healthy
Yeah,
food.
yeah, yeah.
For a big portion of the meal. I mean, at the very least, I mean, I do that all the time. If in fact Huckleberry inadvertently gets a lot of food from, like, last time I fed Maple, she loves sardines and she just picks up the whole thing and
Oh
eats it.
God,
But she gave,
bless
she
you.
get she'll give a whole one. She's very smart, and I think it's because we feed her so many healthy fats. But her she throws whole sardines and other foods and some not great foods to Huckleberry, and it's all part of his diet, so
Well, and
it's just how we roll.
I think it was the second expo. Was it the second expo that Maple had just been born, and you shared that you were making kind of a formula for her, and you
Yeah.
got static from a pediatrician about it?
Oh, that was probably at the last one. Yeah,
Last one.
we
I mean,
basically
who more knowledgeable than you to put together
well, it was funny because
high quality ingredient plan?
well, and I did get her to say, like, she did say, like, I can't recommend it, but she looks great. And,
Mhm.
and it was funny because Emily was low supply. And so obviously, I wasn't, knowing me, I wasn't going to go the traditional route
Right.
in terms of formula. And so it actually brings up a good point in, I think, animal nutrition too, which is that, so we took raw cow's milk, and there was a formula that was developed by a woman named Mary Innig, who wrote an amazing book. If you anyone watching this wants to learn more about fats for dogs, cats, it's about humans, but a lot of that stuff obviously transfers over.
Mhm.
um it's called Know Your Fats.
Yeah.
Let me just verify that because I'll feel like an idiot.
Janet or Diane will search it out and put a link in the comments for you
Yeah,
guys.
Know Your Fats. So it's Mary Enig, Enig, and she developed this formula that is closer to human breast milk. So you take raw cow milk and you make it sort of more succinct with the nutrients and some of the things, which is a really good point to bring up, because what some of the pushback that raw milk gets in the pet food industry is, well, raw cow's milk is made for cows and raw goat's milk is made for goats, and therefore you shouldn't be feeding it to other species. But what I think those people don't really realize is that all mammals' milk are made of exactly the same things.
Mhm.
They're just in different proportions. A good example of that would be with the formula I made for maple. We added more whey to it because raw breast milk, well, it's weird to say raw breast milk, right? Because
It is.
human breast milk has more whey than cow's milk.
Okay. Oh, really?
But so we added some whey to it, and then you do
Right.
some different things.
Mhm.
And so you know, that's why raw goat's milk and raw milk in general is so applicable to other species, because it doesn't matter if it's dog milk, camel milk, human milk, it's all made of the same stuff.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so basically the story with the pediatrician was, the nurse was in there and she was like, so do you breastfeed or do formula? I was like, we do both. And she's like, what brand? And I was like, I make it. And she was like, oh, okay. And then she wrote it down, and then she went out to the doctor came in, and the first thing she said was, so tell me about this formula. And I was like,
Mhm.
I was going through it, and it was a fine experience. But then the notes said, Dad read a nutrition book. And
I had read a nutrition. I just read a few hundred, but yeah, the doubters. And as I think it was Janet pointed out, it's what people hear at the vet. Your dog looks great. What are you feeding him? A fresh food diet. And oh my God, you can't do that. You just said he looks good.
yeah,
You just said his
exactly.
laboratory testing was perfect. And now you're gonna drop the hammer on this. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's exactly the same
Well,
thing.
certainly
And
for as more of a natural rearing breeder, when I start transitioning my puppies, and many people do, to some solid food, I start with raw goat's milk and some ground meat, and the puppies do great. And if you
yeah,
you leave out that goat's milk, they are not happy campers. Um,
yeah, and it's so good. We know on the human side of things in terms of the benefits for allergies, the benefits for not developing asthma, and
oh, all
they
the papers from Helsinki. Oh my God.
yeah, and the interesting
Yeah.
thing about milk specifically too is that there are certain substances in it that we know um, stop you or lessen your likelihood of having allergies, and we
Mhm.
know as well that those are deactivated when it's pasteurized.
Yeah.
So you just don't get that benefit if you're not, on that aspect. But I think it's so funny when these really great studies come out, because it's like weird exposing your dog at a young age to more foods would lessen the allergies. I mean,
Yeah.
it's clearly true, but for
Right.
the conventional types, you really need to be able to give them the data or whatever.
Yeah, but people want numbers and then they still argue with you, but um, at least we have reliable research groups doing these studies. Makes me
Yes.
very happy. And certainly the dog risk group in Finland has churned out some really great content. And they're one of the few groups that have studied kibble dogs alongside raw dogs. Um,
Well, and we have, I can't say what it is, but we have some really exciting stuff coming up too that people are going to know about very soon. And so I think that should, we love that aspect of, you know, how do we make, how do we benefit the whole industry? How do we benefit people's dogs who even don't buy green JuJu products? And so we're,
So speaking of benefiting the industry, what's your take on the Farmer's Dog Super Bowl commercial?
oh, um, I
I
don't
didn't
know.
I didn't see the commercial because I didn't watch the game. I've seen snippets. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could go back to, you know, I mean, I guess it says where we are. I mean, if you look at, say, going to Target or something like that, being a parent now, that is our Friday night, social life. We go to Target, which is very fun. But, if I went to Target and looked in the food, it's better than it was 15 years ago, for sure. It's not good still, but it's,
Right.
better. So that's probably an indication that the consumers are getting better. So that's probably a good thing. But obviously, I would say that there's a lot better formulated foods out there. And I would also encourage people to shop locally at an independent pet food store, because those people they do God's work. They do all the work of vetting the products and making sure that everything you get there is healthy. So I would
Oh,
um
definitely.
so
And
I'm kind of in the
you're
middle,
in
I
it for
think.
your dog. But I was encouraged by the fact that this is so not mainstream. It wasn't pedigree
Yeah.
advertising. It wasn't Blue Buffalo. It was a cooked product, something that the consumer can look at and say, okay, it looks like food.
Yeah, and it part of it is that old guard of going to AFCO meetings and such. A lot of it is based off that old guard of, how they've done pet food behind closed doors for so long
Yeah.
that we're just kind of coming out of that. But I mean, somebody mentioned here that there was a vet that came out against feeding
Oh,
food.
you're not on social media. It was, whoops, sorry, I got the wrong comment there. So there was a veterinarian who at first was describing farmer's dog as a raw product and how basically we're all going to die feeding raw stuff, and sushi comes with a warning and rare steak comes with a warning, and it just rambled. It's like, if raw
Yeah.
meat was this dangerous, anybody who organized a barbecue would be dead.
Well, also one of my favorite foods
Dead.
is steak tartare. For
Oh yeah.
me, when I go to a restaurant and there's steak tartare, I order it literally every time. So,
Yeah.
I'm not saying that, and we know that it's not, in terms of the dogs, we know that it's not going to
Not a danger
necessarily
to
be
them, no.
danger, but even for people, it's like, yeah, that's
It's just
interesting.
crazy.
Yeah,
Think
I
of,
mostly stick to Instagram because it's just pictures and
yeah,
videos.
it's safe. But thinking of people who put raw chicken breasts in a crock pot and dump stuff over it and let it go for the day. They've still handled raw meat and they lived.
Yeah,
They lived. Um,
that's true.
you know, it's
I'll have to
but
check that out.
that is the point of view of a lot of my colleagues. Is it's dangerous, it's inappropriate, it's incomplete. And when someone pointed out to this vet that it actually was a cooked product, she said, well, it's still bad because they probably didn't cook it long enough or hot enough.
That's a very interesting argument. They probably didn't do X, doesn't make it, because,
Yeah.
well,
Did you
you could
call
probably
it? Them?
you can seek that information out pretty
Yeah.
easily. That's a very simple case of, this is what I want to be true, so I will,
Nope.
you know,
Yeah.
it's a very interesting time in terms of, because less processed foods are becoming so much more popular, and it's because people see a difference. That's the only
Yeah.
reason. Like, they've gained so much popularity because dogs and cats do better on them. So,
Mhm.
in terms of your colleagues, it would be interesting to ask them and say, like, okay, you say that this is dangerous, but what are the actual statistics? And they probably wouldn't know that. It's probably just a sense of, like,
No, and
this could be.
if you go to Truth About Pet Food, Susan has it broken down by years, and it's like the recalls and the problems are in kibble, and the people getting sick is because of kibble contamination. It's not raw by
Yeah,
these recalls.
well, and I think too, it probably goes back to a good example. That would be, there was a study done on pasteurized versus raw milk. And what they did
Mhm.
was, they were taking milk for pasteurization, and they did thousands of samples. And then they took milk that was meant for raw consumption. They did thousands of samples, and they found that 30% of those samples that were meant for pasteurization were contaminated with a pathogen, and
Wow.
0% of the raw milk samples were contaminated with a pathogen, because there's just two different. If you're going to be processing a food many, many times, you're
Mhm.
not as worried about
Right.
pathogen control, because you're going to kill everything in it anyway. But that doesn't speak to storage and all those types of issues. So I think the average person who's using, say, a raw diet or fresh food, is going to take more care in how they handle things, just by virtue of
Oh,
the fact that they're doing it. So,
yeah. And I think a lot of my colleagues, my conventional colleagues, don't have an idea of the quality of some of the fresh food diets in terms of ingredient sourcing and how they're handled, and even the DIYs that somebody puts together from the grocery store. It is human quality food. We're not talking roadkill.
Yeah,
And
exactly right.
they're assuming roadkill quality, if that's such a term.
Yeah, and I don't even know what that means. So wait, I think some people are saying no sound.
No sound.
I
Uh,
can still hear you.
so Chris, Angelo, and Johnny lost sound. Janet and Diane, do you guys have sound? Huh. Well, let's see. Nobody's muted. Let me take this off. Um, Can't hear either of us. Well, that's weird because I have no indication that sound is down.
Let me leave and come back.
Okay, do that, please.
Let me see if I can.
I wonder if I need to do my audio source.
Or here, take me out of there and then put me back in. I think
I
you have
don't
to
know
do
if I
that
can
anyway.
put you back in. You may have to come in. Can you guys hear me now?